Welcome back to the Eric Krown Crypto channel. Wishing you a happy and healthy start to this nice macro Sunday morning over here, where we're going to be talking about essentially where the statistics and probabilities do rely upon for talking about a macro potential low, and also when that's perhaps likely to happen as well. So with that in mind, I want to get into the content as fast as possible here. So I'll just humbly request that if you do want to give back to this channel, the easiest way to do that is simply like the video. You can always dislike the video later as well if you so desire. Anyways, just let's jump right into it right now, as this one might be a little bit on the longer side, although I'll try to make this as digestible as possible. I want to start off with this chart as always when talking about macro, bottoms at least, as we are going to be referencing the accumulation distribution indicator over here. Now, this indicator on the monthly has accurately gotten all of the macro shifts in direction, both the upside and the downside, for Bitcoin basically since the dawn of time. And what we can gather from this is a couple things right now. First and foremost, we actually are starting to see our first iterations of red being shown on this. And seeing as we are going to be having a monthly closure in just a few days here, let me actually just double check. Yeah, Tuesday is going to be the last day of the trading month. This chart is actually going to be very compelling coming into that closure to see where we kind of come in at on, I guess, Wednesday it is for the 1st of June. Anyways, the big focus here is that we have never ever seen a macro low or even a major low, that is for Bitcoin, on your higher term timeframes without at minimum printing red on the accumulation distribution indicator, and preferably coming down to one of these sort of extreme levels right around here, of which very likely going to have a chance to do that coming into into this next month of June. Anyways, in this case, that was just that, yes, there's very unlikely a low for Bitcoin in right now. Any sort of short-term rallies are probably just that, short-term rallies. Basically, any sort of price action below $40,000 is irrelevant for a long-term macro trend, at least in the way that I'm looking at things. Doesn't mean that Bitcoin can't have, short-term pop-ups in between, although I do think that the data we're going to go over soon enough is rather sombering in that direction. I think that that's actually rather unlikely right now. But with that in mind, if we do see the accumulation distribution indicator come down, I wouldn't necessarily say exactly to this trend line right here, because I don't necessarily trust trend lines on this. It's just kind of a experimental sort of thing. What I do trust, however, is the very specific shift in slope. So for right now, we are seeing a downside slope. As long as that is relevant, as long as that is the case, still very likely lows to come, or at the very minimum, the lows are knit in. And of course, once we actually get that slope change, well, that has accurately gotten, again, the macro shifts in direction. So this works both the upside and the downside, and I've marked off all of these major areas in those extremes with these green vertical bars right here. You can see that it doesn't necessarily time exactly on the low, but that major momentum shift in direction, which is, in my opinion, a lot more important actually, as for example, we can go to the 2014-2015 saga over here. Did it get the actual low to the tick? No, but it did get basically on the retest of the low right here. That was when we actually saw the slope change from down to up. And over the next few months, Bitcoin actually did work its way out of those lows and upwards and onwards, of course. Same thing over here to the downside. Did it get the actual top? No, but it did say, hey, any sort of rallies after this point, very likely to be sold on. And that worked all the way back down into the January 2019 lows over here. And yes, that one was actually 1 month after the actual wick low, but again, the lows are being set and so on and so forth. So very unlikely that we do see this turnaround obviously in June, but that can start sort of the bottoming process, which I do think is sort of best case scenario. If you see Bitcoin do something like this basically over summer, kind of in some ways kind of similar to last summer actually, where perhaps Bitcoin spikes down even to the low $20,000, maybe even just below $20,000 as well, as we'll look at a little bit later, without actually breaking it, and sort of holds that range between 35 and 20, then that would look pretty damn good coming into end of summer, early Q4 of this year. And at that point, might want to consider that we actually might have a macro bottom in place. Until then, everything is still saying caution ahead. Other than that, let's actually get into the next sort of fun thing over here. This is a chart that I brought up a million goddamn times. I'll do it for the millionth and first time right here. And this is essentially judging why I have a big bias towards continuation towards the downside. This does not account for short-term price action. And it's this chart, just basically the daily BBWP versus stochastic momentum chart, of which anytime that we have seen daily BBWP, which measures volatility of dispersion of returns, get below about 10 percentile and then expand from those levels, it's led to an average move of actually a little bit over 20% done over the course of 10 to 14 days, which actually does start to align with a likely washout in early June, if you will, which is just basically a few days away anyway. So in this case, of the last 12 iterations, over the past couple of years, or I think actually 3 years almost, 10 of the last 12 iterations have been gotten, have 10 of the last 12 iterations have been judged properly by the direction of the daily stochastic momentum oscillator, which you can see right here. So as long as this is angled to the downside, the probabilities of this resulting to another downside move, perhaps to the tune of a little bit more than 20%, are still very much, well, relevant, I would say. Now, of course, until we get a full-on signal over here, it's not fully confirmed. And what would a full-on signal be? Well, just like we have seen in all these past ones, we need to see at minimum the daily BBWP itself get a positive slope, preferably above the moving average. And then the moving average, if you want full-on confirmation, which is very important because you would have actually looked at the last one as a potential confirming move, which it wasn't really. But we want to see the moving average actually get a positive slope as well. If you see all three of those things, that is a full-on confirmed signal. And again, 10 of the last 12 iterations have been gotten properly right by the daily stochastic momentum oscillator over here. So why is this important right now? Well, this will be remaining with downside pressure as long as we're below 29,450 on a daily closing basis. So as long as Bitcoin's below that region, probabilities remain to the downside, and probably looking at that in the next 10 to 14 days, so a couple weeks here, which puts us into early June in this case, which would very much be in alignment with this over here, having one last little washout at minimum, and that would imply a price action all the way down somewhere between 24 to 23,000 bucks if I were to measure it out from here. Basically, yeah, about just under 29. 20% puts Bitcoin at about 23. If it was a little bit on the upper end of that, as we have seen several iterations which were even close to like 30%, even like 23% puts Bitcoin at 22, 30% but puts Bitcoin at around 20,000 bucks. So that's kind of the range of where I'm looking at for a potential major low on Bitcoin. At minimum, I'd be looking for big bounces around there, and then we'll come back to it after if and when that does happen. So again, as long as this condition is present right here, it's just like the most recent iteration that we saw actually in April, which if you're on this channel, you remember this one very likely, and even just the few months before that, several iterations right there. But this one over here, again, same sort of thing, right? Bitcoin trudging its way sideways, down, 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 down. We get the actual signal. Daily BBWP is above the moving average, and then daily stochastic momentum is also is to the downside right here. And obviously that one to get follow through. This one a little bit more on the upper end, though. You will see it over the course of about 13 days to the next major low. All right, cool. So where does that bring us to now? All right, so let's start to talk about where likely Bitcoin could find a low here. So I can give what I think is the most reasonable, at least for right now, and then I can go over like what I think is the worst case scenario that I can come up that is actually supported by statistics and probabilities right now, not just like bullshit like, oh, we have this shape over here, and oh, we have this herpity-derpity over here, and that means that it's like where do fucking people find this shit? I don't know. Doesn't matter though. Anyways, and this would also be on the same sort of thread of time analysis here as well. Okay, so this is an analysis, if I can actually adjust this for a second, of just the bi-weekly, so the 2-week time frame, green 55 exponential moving average. And what I've done over here is I've essentially looked at the deviations over the course of the history for Bitcoin below that level, which have always resulted in the macro low essentially. And for example, if we go back here to 2014, you can see the break below it. Bitcoin trades about 50% below that level over the course of 28 days. Again, it doesn't really, it doesn't put in the low there, it does put in the low there, but it doesn't work its way out of that low for another, okay, this was December, January, until October. So basically 10 months later. And even then it kind of gets going slowly right there. Same thing over here, or similar thing over here, I should say, in, of course, November 2018. I don't know if you can hear the birds in the background, but it's fucking annoying. Okay, fuck birds, seriously. They're little dinosaur creepy fucks. And I also think that's funny. Anyways, same thing over here, right? The deviation below the green 55 was about 46%. So we do expect that the major moves to the downside over time, do get shallower, just like the major moves to the upside also get shallower as well. This is, theoretically likely for a maturing asset over time. The moves, the volatility will naturally grow smaller and smaller relative to the history. Anyways, in this case over here, 46% versus 50%, very much comparable, but yes, less, and also over the course of 28 days. Very interesting right there. Then of course we do have the old Rona dump, of which that was about just under 45%. So again, we see that diminishing relationship over time. This one done in 14 days, but again, this was kind of more of a black swan, if you will. And so we do expect that one to be faster and also to be shallower as well. And so why am I bringing this up? Well, Bitcoin got its first closure below the bi-weekly, as we called out in mid to late April over here. And what have we seen thus far? Thus far, we've seen about, from that move, we've seen about, about 25, 26% move to the downside. If we were to go alongside this relationship, so now I'm kind of making a bit of a hypothetical here. This is a bit of a jump, so understand where I'm coming at this from. But seeing that the relationship is diminishing over time, I just kind of plotted in like 38.5%. Of course, could it be a little bit more than that? Could it be a little bit less than that? Yeah, definitely. But just kind of keep in mind where that puts Bitcoin, which would be about $22,000. If we would extend that to exactly 40%, that would put Bitcoin just below $21,000. So very small margins right here. Relatively speaking. If we were to go even as much as what we saw in the Rona dump, that would put Bitcoin actually below $20,000, basically $19,000 or so. So I do think that still for right now, the most reasonable worst case scenario is probably a little bit above $20,000, somewhere between about $21,000 and $23,000. And also, I should also denote here that we are on the second bi-weekly here, which means that it is 28 days after the break below the 21, or sorry, not the 21, the 55. So this has another 7 days, well, basically 8 days left until expiration. So this would theoretically imply that if we are going off this prior relationship, which theoretically it should get longer over time as well, despite black swans over here, which obviously going to be a lot faster. But in this case over here, do we put in these lows in the next, or do we put in this next major leg to the downside this next 7 days or so? Well, that just kind of played into the prior analysis, right? If we go to this one over here, 10 to 14 days on average for the next major move, and if we go over here, we get the next monthly in just a few days here, which probably does catalyze a little bit more displeasures, of course. On top of that, to bring it one step further with the confluences, we can also put on the dreaded weekly 200 simple moving average. Everyone knows about this one. This is, I wouldn't say it's a meme. It's obviously powerful. It's a generally known thing, and in all markets, as that is where the long-term investors typically want to get in on their long-term assets, assuming that they like them, of course. And in this case, where is it coming in around? It's coming in around, oh, what do you fucking know? $22,000, basically kind of in the midst of those generalized targets. So yeah, these are the things that I'm looking at right now. I forgot to go over one last thing over here on the monthly stochastic momentum, but basically this also makes me consider that it is rather unlikely we're seeing the lows put in at this moment in time. Like, we very unlikely seeing the lows right now. It's a lot more likely that Bitcoin does trade to the south side. It's just the question of is how much, and then I'll go over the worst case scenario in a second here. But basically on this particular chart, the monthly stochastic momentum has been pretty damn good at calling actual macro lows as well, similar to the accumulation distribution indicator, like not exactly to the tick, but good enough for like the actual momentum shifting to the upside. For example, these green vertical bars representing a little bit after the low was in, but the next major move to the upside soon after that. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 iterations. Obviously, the reason why I'm bringing this up right now is simply because it ain't fucking turning up anytime soon, and we can use the good old advanced stochastic over here to judge when that would flip back to the upside. $54,000. Obviously, that's going to massively change coming into the next month, so I expect that's probably going to go in like the 40,000 or so. And if you're looking for this indicator, I've gotten a few questions about it. You can find it in the Krown trading app, as all the other indicators that I use. In fact, well, the ones that like are not just on the public library, of which those you can just type in and all get. Okay, all right. So do we want to go over short-term timeframes here? I suppose we can. Because again, all of this stuff is on the macro, and that, doesn't mean anything for the short term. Like I said, Bitcoin could for all intents and purposes, pop up to like 35,000 bucks and really not change anything on the macro scale here. Do I think that's what's happening? Probably not. No, this looks pretty fucking ugly. So there's that. Keep in mind where CME closed on Friday, because these are typically the better signals to be going into on a Monday, although this is, I think, yeah, it's Memorial Day, which we have a sale, by the way. Should let you know that. Anyways, 12 hour, as we did identify yesterday upon closure on Friday, did confirm hidden bearish divergence of a couple drives. Daily is turning down yet again. I think 6 hour obviously has it as well, as will the 4 hour. Yeah, all of these should be kind of naturally trading with each other. So ultimately, oh, and also the daily, yeah, daily Jewel is about to, or did it? It did get a downside signal. Doesn't look super strong just yet, but well, with very, very low BBWP right here, if that does get follow through for at least another tick or two, that's probably gonna be a pretty fucking good one, as is the daily RSI, given another drive of hidden bearish divergence there as well. So in the short term, would kind of constitute a range resolution to the downside. Same thing as before, basically. I need to see, oh God, my shapes. I need to see a 4 hour closure at minimum below about 28,500. Whilst we have gotten many tests down around there, there's actually been no closures below there. So that would be kind of the shortest term time frame that would be even comfortable marking that off. At that point, I think the implied target was somewhere down around like 26.5 or so, which probably gets Bitcoin on its way. Until then, would be a good invalidation for perhaps short-term upside instead of just continuation to the downside. Well, first and foremost, I need to see the daily stochastic momentum oscillator over here turn to the upside. That would be had again with a closure above 29,650. Let me just double check, because that is giving a different number than one of our other charts that we were looking at. What it was? Hold on. What's going on here? Oh, I'm using Finex. That's why. Fuck you, Finex. Yeah. Okay. So I take back what I said. Or I mean, you could use this for Finex, to be fair. But if you are looking for the daily stochastic momentum level pivots, 29,700 is going to be the more consistent one. Yeah, we see the same thing on the index, 29,660, and Mexico is showing 29,725, and Bybit is showing, well, that's actually USDT, so that's just Tether versus regular USD. Yeah, Bybit over here versus dollar, the perps showing 29.7. So as long as Bitcoin's below there, pressure to the downside, any sort of rally similar to yesterday to the upside, you know, which we actually got yesterday, probably does get pushed back, and doesn't really mean all that much. The only thing that would be absolutely or actually meaningful would be trading back above our range highs on the daily, which is about 31.3, 31.5 region, if you want to be super exact or super safe. Even just getting back above the 25th of May high would be okay, I suppose. But until then, short-term timeframes over here, you know, I don't really have too much to say about them, to be quite frank with you. We are probably aligning for a move, probably not later today, but probably more like Monday, although again, it is a holiday, so maybe that gets transferred over to Tuesday instead. But yeah, BBWP very, very low, basically on all time frames. I mean, here's a 4 hour, here's a 6 hour, here's a 12 hour, here's a daily. We're looking for a big explosive move pretty damn soon here. So I think I'll sign off right there. Again, I am still biased to the downside, barring any sort of a move basically back above range highs, or at minimum, fucking minimum, a daily closure above 29.7. At least that would shift the probabilities that we'll see that 20% move to the upside rather than the downside, which would actually have a target towards 35,000 bucks. But I'll hold off on that for right now, and I will be signing off. So with that said, I want to wish you well, take care, and oh, I forgot to show my Instagram. I've been posting more there, actually, on my personal one. So if you happen to give a fuck, then that might be relevant to you. I'm trying to provide some sort of value while also playing the fucking Instagram game, which is fun. Although we'll see how it goes. And then we got a Bybit link as well. Of course, that's in the description below as well for you. Please understand, when it comes to leverage trading, most people lose. That's because they don't have a fucking strategy, and you don't need to trade on exchange to get a strategy. You can do that on pen and paper, or you can do that for free over here on the Krown trading application in the trading journal, which we just updated as well. And it's gonna be more updates coming in the not so distant future. So yeah, cool. With all of that said, I want to wish you well, take care, and see you soon.